That's a new
jumping
one
the
for us.
gun. I know, right? I have to go at a quarter till. So,
Okay,
yeah, we've just got a little bit of time. But
sounds good.
yes, well, it's nice to see you too today. Well, it's kind of a surprise stream, so we'll see who joins us.
Yeah.
And then it'll go up later as a recording. So, um, how is your new year so far? We're we're 15 days in to the new year.
Super busy and also just anxiety, just a lot. I have a lot of just like it's too quiet right now.
Oh, really? What do you what do you mean? What are you thinking?
I'm thinking
Politically or
where are the riots? Where is the looting? Where is the,
mm,
screaming out of control? Where is it?
mm-hmm.
Are we going to see it on Monday in a really big way? So that's
Yes,
what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
that's my
it's
guess. Well,
yeah.
that's what I heard. Rumblings, rumors, is that they were planning. I don't know who they are, but the group was planning to be in full force on Monday.
The
So who
group
knows? Yeah, the
like
group.
Antifa or something?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of them and some other social justice groups. So the Warriors are
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be out
Mm-hmm.
in full force on Monday. That's what I heard. I'm
Uh,
not so sure if it's accurate, but we'll see in
yeah.
just a few days.
In DC or just out
Yeah,
in general?
DC.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yep.
hello, Clem62, and hello to a guy in his room. It's nice to see you guys. A guy in his room says he agrees with you, Carrie, that it's too
Too
quiet, I
quiet.
think. Yeah. Interesting.
I just feel like I want to make sure all fire hydrants are up and ready to go because a lot of the stuff, like in California, right? A lot of the stuff
Uh-huh.
that's going on right now, and then you're finding people are actually carrying around blowtorches.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
That's not cool.
it's not cool. There's so many theories about what caused the fire. I mean, they're taught it's from homeless people to people walking around with the blowtorches to everything in between. There's just so many theories and so many people to blame. And it's interesting because I was at my eyebrow waxer the other day, yesterday, and the topic came up and I told her, I said, I really can't even listen to Gavin Newsom or Karen Bass at this moment. It's like nails on a chalkboard. And she sort of like jumped at me and
Mm-hmm.
was like, well, they're not necessarily the problem. And I just found myself very defensive and taken aback. And I've known her for 7 or 8 years now. I've been going to her for that long. And she's never been like that before. But she's like, I hate people, just automatically assuming that there's some political motivation. And I said, well, the fire hydrants being empty, not having water, and then the reservoirs being drained or not pumped properly. There being no dams built for years and years, although we've had plenty of water to fill dams before. I mean, there's a reason for that, but it was just really an interesting interaction because I've never experienced that kind of defensiveness before that was sort of protecting the people who I feel have a lot of responsibility to do with why,
Mm-hmm.
whether they started it intentionally or didn't, they were not prepared and they had the resource funding to put into it and they did not use the money for that reason. They used it on other things or they pocketed it or whatever they did with it. But there's always been budget allocations for this. So I don't want to stay on this topic too long since I know we talked about it Monday, but it was just an interesting reaction to see somebody get so protective of our authority figures that here have been completely
Mm-hmm.
draconian and have created a nightmare in California that will take decades to undo. If we get the right people into office today, it would take decades.
Right. Well,
So,
it's an undermining of their. I mean, they've undermined their credibility when they're going to be so heavy-handed with their authoritarian policies towards people, but they aren't even going to do the basic things that they need in order to protect public safety. It's
yes,
there's this chasm of
yes.
Well,
where respect should be.
And they're openly saying that they're not going to. Like, how dare you hold us accountable for anything? Just give us money without saying, let's correct the problem. I don't know if you guys talked about this one, but with Bass, the most shocking thing I saw was that she didn't say a thing. When she got to the
Yes.
air, she felt like she could just not say a thing. And that reminded me of a foster child that I had that was super narcissistic and just knew that she could get away with whatever and not say a word and just stare at you like almost like I have turned you off now. And
Yes.
to watch, I mean, the idea that we would elect people who can just turn us off. Thankfully, I'm not in California, but I might as well be. So, in terms of things that are
Well,
going on in Utah, yeah.
yeah, it can be a blueprint for what other blue states might look like. I mean, somebody mentioned that there's two things in the chat. One was about the power lines needed to be underground. That's a really good point because the Woolsey fires in 2018, they found that the Southern California Edison, which is our supplier of electricity, was to blame for that. If that's true, I don't know, but part of the reason was because the power lines were exposed. So that was one thing that I did see, and then there was one more I was looking at, but I'll catch it later, I guess.
Was it about the
So yeah,
electric vehicles?
oh, the electric vehicles, right? If those and if and went vegan, these fires wouldn't happen. I mean, absolutely.
And
That's
yes to the
that's that's what they're saying. I mean, that's exactly what they're saying. The blame is being, and interestingly, the brush not being cleared. And there's budget for controlled burns and brush being cleared, but then they're talking about too many emissions in the air. Well, these fires have created emissions probably 100 times worse than controlled burns to burn the brush would have created if we had let them do it. But there's all of this environmental stuff around this, a lot of these policies that aren't in our best interest. And I don't think they're in the best interest of the environment itself all the time either, quite frankly. It's just to me another way to sort of launder money. I'm just going to say it, launder money.
And yes to the dystopian novel part. Someone was talking about how we live in a dystopian novel. Every year, it seems like our young people are being told to read one. And I have no problem with what people want to read. But
Sure.
if we're also in a pandemic of depression, it seems like a dystopian novel is the worst thing to put in front of our kids. I sent you guys a picture of the art, right? And I'm
Was
wondering
Yes.
that
about,
today or a couple days ago?
it was a couple of days ago.
Okay.
It was,
Yes,
um,
I remember. Let me see.
yeah. And
I wonder if there's
Oh my
that.
gosh, yes. Yeah.
right?
I don't know. I put
Okay.
Absolutely.
it up.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Can you put it up? I I would
I
have
don't
sent it if I knew
I
that
don't
you
know
could
how
put it
to
up.
share it
And
on
if
my
you see it,
screen,
if
but
I
I
do
can,
Oh,
this.
there.
yeah,
Oh,
we
wait.
can
Okay.
hold it up. Let's
Yeah.
see.
There you go.
Oh, there you go. Yours is good. I'll put mine
Yeah,
down.
that's the one that Carrie sent. What is that,
So
So,
Carrie?
tell,
What are we
yeah,
looking at?
tell us about it.
okay. Well, you're looking at Frida Kahlo first. So she is a recognized artist, obviously. You see the mustache.
Okay,
So,
yeah, now I see.
okay, but she is a
Maybe we'll
recognized
keep it up.
Marxist. So what I did is I put that online and I just asked parents.
Not
I just
working.
I
You want to put
just
it back
said,
up? I'll
okay,
put it up.
Oh, here we go. I had the wrong. Okay.
okay.
You got to find the
So
camera. There it is.
so this is
There you
so
go.
that so that's for a high school art class, without the globes.
Was it made
Okay.
by a high school student?
No, no,
Oh,
this is
so
this
this
is
isn't the high
shown in
school
this.
art. This is what they're providing to the high school students.
Yes.
Hmm.
Okay. So, and the reason I reached out to you guys and I reached out to some friends who are artists was because my thought was, okay, if parents take this and they get upset about it and they take it to the school board, what is going to be the rebuttal? And someone showed a picture of Christ with a loincloth. And, so he only has a loincloth on and he's got nails all the way, in his arms. And it's like, so you can't say that this isn't art for that reason. But my argument is we are saying that we live in a pandemic of mental health. We live in a time where everybody's suicidal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that image to me looks like something. I'm not even talking about decency or not decency. It looks like something that would stick in your mind. It looks like something that is extremely violent.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And then one of the artists who reached out to me, she's the one who sent me the picture of Jesus with a loincloth. Um, and one of the artists reached out to me, and she was super, she's an atheist, right? And she just said, "You're never going to win this argument because of the loincloth situation." However, Frida is a Marxist. And she has one of her final paintings has a picture of her holding Karl Marx's book. And she says that Marxism will set us free. So we're always putting that in the minds of our kids. And I mean young kids. I'm talking middle school and up.
So, who was the artist who made that particular piece?
I believe that is Frida.
Frida made
And
that
so,
piece.
yes,
Okay.
yes. And so, no, the whole I believe that maybe somebody else will be able to pull that up. Yep, Frida
Mm-hmm.
Kahlo-esque image. Yes, I'm pretty sure it was Frida who did it. She had a bone disease,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's what she's wearing there. And everything she did was a self portrait, or almost everything she did was
Mm-hmm.
self portrait. So I understand, but that's the thing where these things sneak in, right? So people will say, "Oh, we've given a mandate, we're changing course," but we're not really changing course. People are pulling back and saying
Mm-hmm.
what they believe people want to be heard. Like take Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg is completely changing his tune, but I believe it's a manipulation.
Of
Oh,
course.
yeah, big time.
Right? Like it would have
Of
changed. It would have
course.
been the other side 100%
Mm-hmm.
if elections would have won a different way. I'm not here to. I don't want to talk about the elections, but what I am saying is that the mental health abuses on our children and on society in general, they're not going to stop. They're just going to water them down and seem more mild
Mm-hmm.
for literally the next 16 months. And then
Well,
they're going to pick them right back up just as hard.
and what are you seeing with the kids? Because what I'm seeing is that kids who
Mm.
were about middle school age when the lockdowns happened, they are so far behind socially. They're
Yes.
so delayed in terms of social skills and just ability to behave and comport themselves with competence and confidence in the world.
Yes.
I feel like
Uh-huh.
we've really stunted this generation of kids, especially that age group. And I wonder what your thoughts are as you're working with kids.
You're going to make me cry on this part. I told you guys about having a student who everything that we fight against, he's embraced.
Mm.
And so he said the other day that he wants to do his final history project um, on a black rapper. And what he said was, well, he's really black because he came from Compton. If you didn't come from Compton, you don't really have the black experience. Yesterday, I had the kids. So I'm teaching them intentionally. Like I've said before, we all teach intentionally. We all teach with an agenda. And I'm teaching these kids intentionally why America is worth fighting for. And then next month, I'm going to teach them Black history, the stories they've never heard about successes and about unity and about achievement, and the kind of stories, like I said, that they've never heard. And then the next month, I'm doing socialism. But in order to get to why socialism is bad, they have to understand why America is good and not
Right.
perfect, but good, right? But so some of these kids, and what's really sad is this one's very confident. So he's probably the most confident student that I have. And the other kids just sort of look at him and they're so fragile. So yesterday my lesson was on American resilience. And I showed them the story of the man who wrote the hymn "It Is Well with My Soul." So within 2 years, he lost all of his children, all five of his children.
Mm.
Wow.
And there's much more to the story, but that's it in a nutshell. And I showed them Norman Rockwell and how Norman Rockwell intentionally captured beautiful moments, even though he lived during the Great Depression, even, all of, so how then could people who've been through so many really, really hard things be truly resilient And today, anything upsets us. And so the kids actually brought up suicide. And then one kid said, well, suicide happens when we're not kind to gay people. And I said,
Oh my
interesting.
gosh.
And
Wow.
and and so I said, that's so interesting. I said, I think we should be kind to everyone, but I think that if we statistically look at it, even in our own community, the people who are likely to carry through with suicide, not to attempt, but to carry through with it, tend to be your white Caucasian male.
Mm-hmm.
And
Hmm.
then I just moved from there. But I said, but what is it? Why are we no longer being taught resilience? If you want to learn hope, how do you learn hope? Well, and so I showed them music and I showed them I showed them vaudeville, the original vaudeville, and I showed them black people in blackface. And so before I could even start it, my super wise kid was like, because white people wanted to mock black people, and I was like, that's true, but do you know who the first people to wear the blackface were? Black people. And I said, why?
Mm,
Why would they do that? And I said, and Italians mocked, and Jews mocked, and Irish mocked. Why did they do that? They felt bad if they weren't being mocked on stage.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because then they weren't included. And
right.
also, if you can laugh at people, if you can laugh with people, you probably don't hate them.
Yeah.
So this generation, I'm talking about, what was that show with like buckwheat and
Mm-hmm.
the little girl who was like all femme fatale, but she's like 5 years old. And, what was
Little
that? The Little
Rascals.
Little
Rascals. Yes.
Yeah.
rascals.
And I'm sitting there going, how come they got it? And no, behind scenes, they did not get it right. But what they were showing to society was a whole lot more. These kids were friends.
Mm-hmm.
They could play together. There wasn't all of this crazy stuff that today kids are afraid to talk to one another. And I told the kids, okay, so show me your stereotype of your culture, only yours, because I didn't want it to go into a crazy place, right? And that's how we heal. We have to heal as the parents, or as the educators who go across. Yes, the suicide stuff they say is used to manipulate you and to make decisions. It's true. It's true, and it's a hard one when the kids bring it up. My younger class tried to bring it up, and I just steered that as fast as I could away from it because I'm not having that conversation with little guys. I just can't.
Mm-hmm.
But our middle school kids are inundated with it. My son says in high school, he says the schools are so focused on this anti-bully culture that the other kids are looking, they're
Mm-hmm.
making bullies out of people who aren't.
Yes.
And it's really, so that's what our kids are facing. And the way that we change it is so easy. We sit down and we talk to them. We make sure that we are like really involved with them. Um, and but it's easy and it's hard because we are conditioned to be distracted. We are conditioned to be all about ourselves and we want everything to be easy. And when I asked some of the kids, one of them said, well, it's just, you're just a different generation. That's just not the way that we are anymore. And I thought, and I asked, I was like, so do you think the rich people, because last week we talked about the French Revolution. I said, so do you think the aristocrats in the French Revolution, do you think they had to work? Do you think life was pretty easy for them, that they could just sort of, you know, we've always had people who could coast.
Mm-hmm.
Some people made a choice not to because it was better for them. And that's where resilience comes from. When we make the choice, even when it is easy, you know, even when it is easy, we say, I'm still going to find a way to work hard. I'm still going to, because it's good for me. Because we're so conditioned for safety, and we consider safety. Yes, ending bullying requires absolutely. I live that in Utah. We are so about safety culture constantly, 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 and
And
these kids
bullying has
are
been
broken.
going on in schools since the beginning of time. Okay, it's been going on since before any of us were born. And what did we do with all of that? We learned how to respond to a bully and we built resilience as a result of it. We didn't have these school-wide campaigns that then put the focus on it so much that people then turn others into bullies or become bullies themselves. I mean, it's the same thing. Somebody wrote in the chat earlier about that Netflix show, 13 Reasons Why, and I screened that for a class once. This one episode where this high school girl actually does end her life, and they show in great detail in this episode her in the tub slitting her wrists and her mother finding her, and it's really very graphic, and
Wow.
that show continues to go on. So, I mean, these kinds of things with the over focus of anti is exactly what's bringing it into the forefront and making it a bigger issue than it was. Although we've always had these issues with young people, there's always been bullying, there's always been suicidality. I do not believe this is the first time we've ever seen it, but we are starting to put it in the forefront. It's becoming an option, and that's the difference between what it was back in the day and what it is today. Is that today it's an option, and that's a huge part of the problem, along with the anti-bullying campaigns being an issue too. So
Oh yeah, they're
resilience is
huge.
what's right, and you fought back a bully by not taking it and having resilience and standing up and doing something about that. But anyway, continue with
We
what you were
also
saying. Sorry.
redefine what a bully is. We're redefining
Yes,
what a bully is. So you are not
yes,
a you are a bully if you
yes,
don't create a quote unquote safe place. So if you
yes,
say, you know what, I will use your name, but that's as far as I'm going with this thing. And even not even explaining it. If you just use their name and don't coddle, you're now a bully.
yes,
Well,
So
some of the problem, the bullying, I mean, I guess I was bullied in school and it was crappy. I mean, it was really not fun. As
yeah,
any kid who experienced, I think you experienced some of
horrible.
that too, Christine. You've talked about it
A,
before.
a lot of
A lot of
bullying
it.
because of my
Yeah.
ethnicity. Yeah.
But yeah, same. And I think that bullying among kids is partly a symptom of putting kids in these heartless environments where there's not enough positive influence, and it's kind of Lord of the Flies out there. You've got all
yes,
these kids who are being allowed to do these kind of social hierarchy hazing games and leave. I mean, people are going to decide who they want to hang out with and who they don't want to hang out with, who they like and who they don't like, and that's a normal part of life. And that's a normal way of children developing their social connections and structures. But with enough guidance and with parents around or people around who actually are invested in loving these children, you're going to
Yes.
see that manifest very differently. When you throw kids into classrooms where there's 30 of them and one teacher who's very busy, and then they're out on the playground or they're in lunchroom and it's an institutional and heartless environment. And so then you come along and you think you're going to solve this with more policy and more
Yes.
heartless institutionalism. I think
Yes.
you're getting it all wrong. It's just
but
really.
what they're messing up with is that they believe that what they're doing is kind. They believe they're creating a better world. I sent you guys that paper about humanity and
Yes.
Mhm.
the idea that we're guiding humanity, or you are more human if you're progressive. If you adopt progressive ideals, you're more human. And you put kids in a class and you set them in front of a computer and they have like 30 questions that are telling them that this is the way to be more human. And they're watching their scale go. They're watching the little dial move and to be able to tell their human whatever. And I'm like, so here's the point. School, because I'm torn on this. Having an only child, I wanted him to be socialized, and he's actually thriving in public school. But part of
Oh,
his
fantastic.
thriving, I mean, he really goes for the music. That's what he goes for, goes to school for. But but the rest of it is parents have to recommit to being involved. They must. They have to stop trusting quote unquote the experts, because we're proving left and right that the quote unquote experts are damaging our children. Now here's the thing. If you are a child who has a really bad home life, you are a child who, maybe people don't think is very bright because your home life takes so much of your energy that you couldn't possibly sit and focus. You know how you're going to feel the best at school? It's not because your teacher is going to give you special attention, because when your child when a teacher gives the student special attention, the other kids inherently will resent that student.
Yes, of
That
course.
remember teacher's pet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But so, and when they're being taught that they should do that, that they should center around that. Another thing I sent you guys was we had that situation with the room mom who's a trans person. Um, and they were like, why would you protect the safe over the vulnerable?
Mm-hmm.
So they're teaching the language is resent these girls because they're already
Yeah.
safe,
Mm.
and focus on this man
Oh
in a
my
girl's
gosh.
dorm, right? And it's the same thing in every situation. When we center around the marginalized, we make the other kids bitter. Meanwhile, if you walk into your class and you give the kids a test and you have worked so hard to make sure they all know it, and you get to give that kid who's had a hard life an A and a smiley face or whatever else,
Mm-hmm.
they go, I got an A. And they're so excited. And they start to build their confidence. And if you build your confidence, you're generally a kinder person,
Mm-hmm.
but we're building narcissists and we're doing it on purpose.
Mm,
Well, something you said there about parents. This in the chat, Pepina said this falls on the parents, and I think this is interesting because, well, I saw this post on Twitter a week or so ago, maybe, where a mother said she was at the doctor with her baby. Baby got a series of shots, and then the doctor picked up the baby when the baby was crying and comforted and wouldn't allow the mother to hold her own baby. The baby's kind of crying and reaching for mom, and the doctor is holding the baby. And so the mother was posting about how traumatic this was for her, being held away from her crying child, and
Yeah.
not even getting into the conversation around babies and vaccines right now, just setting that to the side. Just this experience that this mom had. Well, you could see kind of an interesting reaction in the comments, with a lot of people saying that she should not have allowed the doctor to step in there, that this was a failure on the part of the parent, that that's your child, you step up and take your baby, that don't allow. That's the first kind of a step in allowing the institution to stand between you and your responsibility as a mother, as a parent, which is first and foremost to guard and protect your child. So, and I agree with that. And also, I want to acknowledge that that mom, that's a young woman who likely was raised in this very institutional mindset, who probably had the institutions between her and her parents all her life, and has been taught to respect these people in these authority roles, to the point where
Yes.
she's almost a victim of the situation, this sort of, here we're going to go systemic, right? But the she is a
Yes.
product of this same mindset. But we do have to remind people, or people have to remind themselves, we have to remember as people that we do have ultimate authority. You're an adult, and that is your child. And
that's right.
that doctor is also an adult, just another adult in this world that doesn't have any more authority over anything than you do. She's doing her job, you're doing yours, and your job is just as important as her job is. And your job right now is your baby. And I think that parents have their confidence eroded from the very
Absolutely.
get go. I mean, from pregnancy, mothers are being overmanaged by a medical system that tells you what you can eat, what you can't eat, that basically threatens you every step of the way. I had a midwife who canceled, who threatened me that that if you don't do a like the level 2 glucose tolerance test. You guys remember the glucose tolerance? Maybe Christine, I don't know if you're familiar
Yeah.
with that, but you have to take this nasty sugar drink, and then go get your blood drawn.
Yes. I've taken it before, the
Okay.
test.
So with my third child, I was told, I got called the night before my glucose tolerance test, that instead of doing a 1 hour glucose tolerance test, I needed to do a 2 or 3 hour glucose tolerance test, like a big longer one where I had to schedule longer and do two blood draws after like some. I asked the doctor why, their midwife why. She said because of geriatric pregnancy. Well, I was 34, and it's technically a geriatric pregnancy at 35. So I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't technically, and that's an offensive word anyway, isn't it? Really awful to be 34 and called geriatric. But,
Yes. Oh my
but,
God.
but anyway, this was her thing. She said, and I tried to argue back. Well, I don't want to do that. I have my kind of day already scheduled, my plan. I've already planned for this,
Yeah.
and I don't want to do this another blood draw, and I don't want to stay at the doctor's office an extra hour. Can I just do the one I've already got scheduled? I'm not actually over that age limit, and I'm not going to be when by the time my baby's born. And she said, if you don't do this, you're close enough to the line. If you don't do this, then I'm not going to okay your home birth. And it was a threat. Like we have this birth plan, this whole thing that we're doing, and because I'm not listening to the doctor, she's going to change. She's exercising coercive control over me. I also saw a young doctor. I've told this story before. When I worked at a primary care clinic, a mother didn't want to supplement with the formula that the doctor was demanding she supplement with. The mother said no. The doctor called CPS on the family
Yeah.
because she was upset that the parents weren't following her direction. So we see our authority as parents is undermined from the very earliest. And then more and more with schools as well. As our kids are in school, the teachers know our kids better than we do. And there I just saw somebody posting about how teachers are child development experts. And there's always lots of people who say parents are not qualified to homeschool their children, that they belong in the schools. And so, yes, I do agree that this does fall on the parents. And also, I think that parents have a complete crisis of confidence.
For sure. Well, and now we have something coming into our schools called Whole Child, Whole Schools, Whole Communities,
Mm-hmm.
or the WISC program. And so I've told you guys before, I live in the kind of place where it is not uncommon to see somebody ride their horse to the grocery store. But we have this enormous school coming in, and there's no way that it isn't going to have a clinic. And now last week they came out and said, we're so excited that we're putting a teleclinic into the school. And then in the bottom, if you read through the whole article, which most people won't, it says, and eventually we'll have mental health services too.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's constantly, and the fact that people don't understand where it comes from, we're doing a gentle overtaking compared to what Mao, Stalin, and Pol Pot did. They took the kids. They just said, parents, if you don't follow our lines 100%, we're taking your kids. And we're not. They're not taking our kids. We're giving them away. We're giving them away for convenience sake. Um, and the thing is that you're right. They're beaten down when you go or when you send a message to the teacher and you say, you know what, I don't want my child taking a part in the survey, they say, well, we're the experts. So they're literally responding to the parents and saying, we're the experts. If you are, someone who maybe didn't go to college, maybe even dropped out of high school, maybe your spelling and grammar aren't that good, and you have a teacher who's responding to you, well, of course, I know better than you. So just let me help you and let me give your kid a better opportunity than you had. You're going to say yes. But more than that, I think, is the fact that we have been groomed to be selfish. We have been groomed to be lazy. And back to my first thing, we have been groomed to not be resilient. There's very little in society. I mean, I think that's why we look at people who achieve and think they're so remarkable. Instead of teaching everybody that they can achieve, we look for, my friend Adam Coleman said once, especially in the Black population, we look for our leaders instead of knowing we can be them ourselves. And as I've said many times before, Black people were the guinea pigs of all of this. They started and they, embraced it all. And once it finally worked to the point that, don't you dare say something about Bass, despite the fact that she doesn't even talk, don't you dare say something about her. And now we're using those same tactics for everyone. In every single category. We've got now places don't get aid if they don't have abortion clinics.
Yeah.
We have all sorts of things that we're doing that are the exact same blueprint, which is really sad because the people who scream systemic racism are the people who tend to adopt these very systemically racist ideas. So
Well, and I think that's an interesting comment from Jay Adams that you put up um, a second ago, Leslie,
Mm-hmm.
about
You want to read
the
it?
mental health ads are really weird. Like all of a sudden, I believe they're using mental health like business to cash in. They
And
absolutely
yeah,
are.
and he
That's
goes
why
on to
you
say
see
this as
it.
well.
Yes, I don't know why there's a huge push to go to therapy. It's strange, virtual. It's not even in
Yeah.
person, and that's very true. I mean, you watch even a sporting event game now. I was watching the Dodgers, and on the commercials, they've got suicide hotline information. When you go to the stadium itself, they'll flash the number. If you feel suicidal, here's the phone number to call. While you're at a stadium, it's so normalized now. That's what the issue is. It's become so
Hmm.
normalized, and it is therapy in a can. That's what it is. It's
This.
packaged therapy,
Yeah.
right? It's all of these online places there that chase me down constantly, and every therapist who's on LinkedIn, that it's basically therapy in a bottle, and it's manufactured, right? And it is to turn in a profit because they are making money hand over fist. They are offering bonuses of thousands of dollars to join their practice. I'm talking 3 grand to join their practice, which is unheard of in mental health in general.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of manufactured, I think, fits in with this institutionalization that we're talking about here, because even mental health has become part of that institution, part of the institutionalization. And there's something wrong with us if we don't go to therapy. I think there's a
Mm-hmm.
big push that we're not stigmatizing therapy anymore. I think we've turned a corner to where if you don't go to therapy or you don't have a therapist, what's wrong with you? What are you avoiding in your life?
Mm-hmm.
What is it
Right.
that you're not talking about, right? So I think that we've rounded a corner here and gone off a cliff here, or about to go off a cliff here, that's rather scary, and we've got to pull that back.
You know, I'm glad Jay Adams is bringing this up, and I'm glad you addressed that, Christine. This other person in the chat, Jeffrey Fildy, sorry, says it's not just business for your cash; it's a way to collect more data on you. And I have a couple of thoughts on this. When
Mm,
I was studying clinical mental health counseling in graduate school, there were a number of things that bothered me about the way that it was being taught, and that's what this whole channel is about, really. But um, one of the things that gets less attention than the social justice aspect of it for me is the medical
mm,
technical aspect of it. I felt really disturbed by the way that therapy is being performed and taught as it's a very mechanistic. It's like a drop down menu of diagnostic labels and smart treatment plans for patients. It's almost like we're going to have AI doing this very soon, a lot of
yes.
this. And it's tailored for insurance. Like a lot of the ways that it's coded is about insurance reimbursement. It's not about, it's like you're being taught you have to write it this way in order to justify the insurance
Yes.
reimbursement, and so that you can get the approval from insurance for this thing. And then at the same time, this is a trend that I was seeing when I was billing insurance and working in primary care for years, was increasing amounts of data being collected by insurance companies on patients. So
Mm,
it went from when I first was doing this in like the, I guess this would have been like the early 2000s, maybe mid 2000s. They would collect CPT codes and ICD, what was it at the time,
mm-hmm.
like nines or something like that. And then now there some insurance companies collect something that they call CCDA, which I think is coordinated clinical data architecture, and it's an upload of every single file on all of your patients, all of the patients that use that insurance. Now that we use
Yes.
EHR, electronic health records, instead of your old paper files, all of it's collected already in your computer system, and then the insurance company requires providers to upload all of that data on all patients that use that insurance company. I saw it happening with Apple Health, which is Washington State's like Medicaid plan. So for families that need subsidized insurance, they don't even have to be super poor. There's just lots of people who are self-employed that use Apple Health. It's not just people who are, qualifying for low income Medicaid. It's just a very common insurance to see people using. And Apple Health requires doctors to provide 100% of those records. So that's all the soap notes that the doctor wrote, their observations about you, your diagnoses. It's detailed stuff. And if they're doing
Mm-hmm.
that for primary care, I don't doubt that they're doing the same thing with your therapist. When your therapist
Yes.
is taking notes, they're taking all of that. And to me, it's like insurance doesn't have any place in someone's mental health care, period, full stop, the end. That's not
Yes.
insurance. If you need to talk to somebody because you're mourning or because you're stuck in life or because you're just really deep in depression, your insurance company doesn't have to have anything to do with that. I mean,
Yes.
either okay it, give me so many visits a year. If you want to pay with insurance, that's fine, but you don't need to know the details of it.
Yes.
I
But
think it's
that's the
just
only way that they justify that. Yeah, that's what you have to do to get paid. And I remembered teaching my students this, and they'd walk out of class and say, "Well, God, Christine, I'm so depressed now. This is so depressing." And I'm like, "I'm not here to make you thrilled and excited about going into this profession. I'm here to tell you how it is, that this is the way that it's going to be. If you are okay with that, then you can go ahead and go forward. If not, then you need to rethink what it is you're choosing to do with your life. Because at the end of the day, you can't get around that if you're using insurance. It is data mining, absolutely. They're collecting all of your health information, and you have to write treatment plans that show you're working on what it is you diagnosed your patient with, even if what you're actually doing in the therapy room is something completely different. So the notes that people write, you know, have a lot to do with what the insurance company is going to end up seeing and being able to upload from your record. And they don't necessarily see the notes on a weekly basis, but they see your treatment plans. So
Mm-hmm.
they see what goals you have for them. Just in that regard, that tells you a lot about what's going on with your client. So people choose to either lie or withhold if
Or
they don't want to do that.
withhold.
They're going because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise you're not going to get that covered. And um, if you do get it covered, you're going to have a whole hell of a lot of information that's being captured by people that you don't want knowing your business. Simple as
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
well, I think what's as simple as that is they want our they want us from the cradle to the grave to be allegiant to the state. That's
Yes.
it. So every institution points back to that. All of this data, it lets you know if you're a dissident. My
Mm-hmm.
son was there. It was mental health week last week, and they wanted to do surveys and talk and evaluate their SEL. So Utah is number two in the nation on education, which I have a really hard time believing, unless it's all about measuring your SEL. And then I can see it being second to California. Um, and I told him, I don't want you to do this. I said, if you're old enough that you can make the decision if you really want to. But I said, they're going to have your record and they're going to see you as a dissident. And I don't think you want that. I don't think he's old enough to make that decision. Do you want to be seen as a dissident? Because it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to stand up. I was listening to someone on Gen Spect. He's like from well, he's from Europe somewhere. And he just said, a lot of us will not make it through all of this, but it's still worth it. Because once you give up on the truth, once you stop saying what needs to be said, then you are giving up your soul.
Mm,
And so and that's what's happening is people are being trained to give up their soul. People are being trained to see the red ball as a green square.
Mm-hmm.
And if you
right.
don't, you're, oh, my favorite new word that everybody's saying in the religious circles is contentious. Don't be contentious,
Mm-hmm.
as in don't push back. And it's pretty sick to me to like
I
tell people.
think there's also a problem here too on the other side of this. I was able to stand up and be courageous and you know publicly resign and all this kind of thing. I was in a position where I could afford to do that. I could afford to go without a paycheck because I'm just in
Right.
a family household at this current moment where that is, you know, doable, right? For now. Not everybody can do that.
It's
So
true.
we're asking people, who have a mortgage, who have kids, who need to, feed their families, who have just spent, this money getting educated and have loans and bills and debts and all sorts of things, to stand out and to be courageous and to stand up. And then what's going to happen to them then? Who's going to catch them when they fall and they need that mortgage payment? Is it going to be
Right.
anybody who's going to be there to rescue these people? And I think that's a huge part of, I'm not trying to let people off the hook for not saying what needs to be said. I'm saying I can understand why they don't say it. I took so much initiative in it because I could afford to do so on many levels. If I was in that situation, however, had I not, had I had the kids and I'm in a two-income home and we need to have both incomes and whatever, if things were very complex for me, I don't know that I would have ever done that. I might have actually tried to go around the system as best as I could and do things that I thought were ethically appropriate, appropriate way to handle things, and sort of tried to kind of go around the back door there. That's probably what I would have done. Um, but I wouldn't have come out and had this big, you know, reveal about everything I think about what's going on. So I think there's that component too, is people chose the profession and now they're kind of stuck in this space.
Right. Yeah. So some people cannot push back. The only thing that they can do is be guardians. They can just
Yes.
say, you know what, not in my classroom, not in my office. That's the one thing that they can do. And they can, and at that same time, they have to hope that the wrong student or the wrong patient doesn't come into their classroom with an agenda, to out them.
Yeah, you're kind of on a
It's
knife's
true.
edge if you're in that position.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think that, another thing when the people in the chat talking about all the ads for therapy and why is there such a push for mental health? Well, it's important to remember therapists really are, right now, really are being trained that their number one role is to be an advocate and a social justice activist.
Yeah.
And so you're looking at people who are being trained to re educate you and make you think differently. And so, I mean, it seems like it's just a push for mass re-education on some level.
Oh,
That sounds really
absolutely.
conspiratorial, but I saw
Oh,
that. I mean,
absolutely.
I was being told that in my courses. This is your number one role as a counselor is to be a social justice activist.
Absolutely. That's not conspiratorial at all. That's exactly the direction that we're headed in. Or we've not headed in, we've already arrived. That's where we are today.
All
Yeah.
right, so that's pretty dark. We are about to conclude, so I know it's a quick switch, but do you have anything optimistic that you want to talk about before we pop off? Is there anything positive that you're seeing or that gives you hope right now?
I feel like I read somewhere this morning, maybe I'm wrong, but that the House passed a bill that men can't play in women's sports. I think that that bill passed today. I know it has to go through the Senate, and there's a few other things that have to happen, but that made me feel a little bit hopeful,
Hmm.
um, that our corrupt and completely treasonous and all the other words you can describe our government to be. There's some hope there that that bill was signed. Hopefully that sticks. And that's a good spot to be in for our kids, for our girls.
Definitely.
I am starting this month to put my lessons, my homeschool lessons online. I'll be recording them. It won't be as cool because the kids aren't interacting, but I'm going to put them on YouTube and on Rumble. Next week's is on purpose. So just what I think is that we have it within ourselves. And I'll be honest, a little bit of AI, because I sometimes will be like, this is my idea. AI, give me a lesson, like fix it or organize it for me. But we have it within ourselves to write this track. So I think that's
Mm,
extremely hopeful and extremely positive. My kids
yes.
get a big dosage of it in an hour, and every one of them walks out. Even my woke child walks out and like gives me a high five as they're walking out of the classroom because they feel like they matter, not like the crazy matters.
Yes.
Hmm. That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm glad you're going to be putting that together, Cari. I'll look forward to that. Thank you all for joining us today. And I hope
Yes.
everybody gets outside for a little bit today, no matter if it's yucky and snowy and rainy or whatever. Just go out and look at the sky or watch the
Yes.
sunset or go for a walk. I hope you get away from these kinds of heavy thoughts and big looming fears and existential stuff. Just
Yes.
go step on the grass somewhere and enjoy your day a little bit.
Yes.
Yep.
All right.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining me, ladies. And
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for
if you
having us.
stick around, I'm going to end the broadcast right now. Bye, everybody.
Okay.